Hi there and welcome to a brand new day in the studio. In today's video, we're really going to take certain areas of the painting now and bring them to life. We're going to try to go into each of these forms and add more depth, more value transitions, more elaborate edges and planes and all of that. So we're really going to try to bring this area forward and really start to bring it to life. So on the palette here, we have titanium white, flake white, burnt umber, alizarin permanent, cadmium red, medium, yellow ochre, sap green, ultramarine blue, and ivory black. And for our medium today, we are using liquid original. So what I'm going to do is get a clean brush and apply a little bit of liquid original to this brush. And we're going to start to oil out the areas of the painting that we are going to be working on. So we're going to start off with the forehead, and we're going to actually just oil out the entire face, but we're going to be very careful to only oil out the areas that we are going to be working on. Now, oiling out does a couple things. So first of all, what it does is it helps to bring back the original colors and values that the painting had when it was wet. Remember yesterday I did say that it would look a little bit different. It would look a little bit different after it dried. So somehow actually this layer that we painted yesterday is dry. And I used a lot of ivory black in that mixture. Not sure how it dried so quickly. Maybe the liquid original does dry faster than the Neo McGilt medium I used to use. Maybe we're gonna stick with liquid now. But in any case, look at that. It's really starting to bring back the way the painting looked like when it was wet, when we first painted it, at least this layer. Now, after the layer we applied today dries, it's going to fade a little bit again, but it's okay. I mean, it's going to fade like that until you're completely finished with it. You let it dry for a little bit and then you apply the final varnish. It's okay. That's just one of the properties of oil painting. Pretty magical how the oiling out the surface kind of really brought back those original colors. Could have said we already brought it back to life then and there. But what we're going to do now is we're going to mix up a value range on our palette, still trying to withhold to these color families that we establish. Alright, so what we're going to do is minimize the hue changes. So we're going to keep the hue changes to a minimal still, and we're going to work on the value range. And then when we return to working from life on Tuesday, then we'll go and tweak some of the colors with observation, like looking from life. So let's mix up the value scale of flesh tone on this palette. So we're going to start off with the burnt umber. So just burnt umber, ultramarine blue. And this brush already has some of the Neo McGilt. I'm going to put a little bit more. We really want a consistency that's somewhat like butter, like if you just put butter in the microwave for a couple seconds. So this is going to be our darkest dark, and it's going to be a little bit of a warm dark. So that's why I'm using the burnt umber and the alizarin permanent, but I'm also using a little bit of ultramarine blue just to make sure it's not too hot. Now we're going to start to move up the value range. So a little bit of cadmium red and back to the burnt umber. And we're going to combat the warmth of the cadmium red with the sap green. So there we have sap green now. So now as we continue to move our way up this value scale of flesh tone, we're going to start to introduce a little bit of yellow ochre into the mixture and back to the sap green, just to further neutralize the heat. But then it's starting to get a little bit too yellowish, so I'm going to go back to the alizarin permanent just to introduce a little more pinkish tone, pinkish flavor to it, back to the burnt umber just to neutralize some of the saturation. And now we're going to use flake white. We're going to start to use a little bit of flake white as we start to move further up into the mid-range of the value scale. A little more of our medium, the liquid original. So now we're going to start to get some like orangey pinkish tones. So now we're going to approach the kind of the value range that we're going to be in for the majority of this layer. So we're going to call this the, I don't know what we're going to call it, to be honest. We're going to be bringing certain forms to life. That's what we're going to do. Well, now we will shift gears into the titanium white. See how much brighter the titanium white makes the values? So the reason I like to use flake white is in the mid-range. I can use more of it, raise the value ever so slightly without blasting the light too much, which in part also helps to build the body of the oil paint. So I remember painting him from life. There was a little bit more of an orangey tint than in the photograph, so I'm going to use a little bit more yellow ochre, and we're almost done with this little value scale. And we're going to be taking directly from this value scale. Again, trying to keep the hue variations, trying to keep the hue variations to a minimal. I know it's a little bit warmer there, but it's going to be all right. Trying to keep all of these hues very unified. And now, just to top it off, a little bit more of a lighter, more yellowish shade of flesh tone. Right there. So now we're going to get a different brush. So let's say, I don't know. Let's get this one. So we're going to start off with the forehead. We're going to try to build even more form onto the forehead. There's going to be a little bit of a tiny plane change right over here existing onto another plane change. So all of this, as we established before, was just one large plane change. And now we're going to have a little bit of a taper into the form right here. Now I did say in the second color pass that I would make the color a little bit more elaborate, but I decided maybe to hold off on trying to put too much hue variation just yet, and really try to push the effect of the forms with very minimal chroma changes, very minimal hue changes. So right around here we're going to start to put some more delicate little touches. Today is definitely one of those days you want to just sit back, relax, have a cup of tea, have a nice and relaxing time, and really start to observe each one of these major planes and figure out how to subdivide them. This is really one of the most exciting parts of the painting, because now we're really going to see the illusion of the form develop right in front of our eyes. It can take a while to create these forms, and I know it looks like I'm doing something that's really repetitive by tapping the brush, but what I'm doing is I'm letting the transparency of the previous layer show through. So by the amount of pressure that I'm putting on the brush, I'm also modulating the amount of paint of darker value that I want to exist, because this value is darker than what I'm painting over top of. So again, like I said before, I really want each layer to show. I really like that. I really like paintings where I can just go stand in front of them and see how the layers are just evolving. It's really much almost like a sculpture. It's pretty neat, I think, to be able to see all the different layers in a painting. And you know, there's going to be a little bit of a vein on the side of his head. So for that, I'm going to get a different brush, a lighter value, still within the same color family, just taking right off the palette. And see how there's going to be a little bit of a vein. And you know, what I want to prove today, or at least show, is that you can really develop the illusion of form. You can really sit there and take a while and develop each individual area without having to get bored. It's not boring to sit and observe each one of these shapes. It's really not. It's quite a bit of fun to explore each one of these forms and push some, perhaps we'll push some further away from the light than we had before, such as this area here. You know, and that's really the most fun, to be able to explore the forms, explore the surface, and we're not really thinking about it as copying the picture. Not at all. We're thinking about it as interpreting visual information. And let's see, who can finish my sentence? It's not about copying the picture. It's about interpreting visual information and creating a painting. There you go. And now see how we're starting to create that little vein, that little form overlap. Now as we're doing that, we can still scatter a little bit more. So we're going to spread a little bit more of this value across here. Don't worry about this edge. This edge is not really a problem right now. We'll get into that edge a little bit later. But right now we're trying to focus on these shapes. And you know what? We're going to address that little edge between the forehead and the hair, because just from experience I remember if I oil out one area and I leave kind of like a sharp edge, so the edge between the hairline is a very soft edge, so we're going to go ahead and address it right away. So I'm going to get a clean brush, so this is a clean brush, and a little bit of our medium, our liquid original, and we're really going to just like oil this out now, just so we can get that edge back, so the way the edge used to look, and very carefully not trying to go over the stuff we just painted. So again, try to oil out each section that you're going to work on. And already I can tell that I'm going to have to work on that shape a little bit, the edge of that shape, that is. Very carefully now, not trying to oil out too many areas that I don't want to work on today. So again, today is really all about bringing certain areas to life. See, look at that. Look how the oil just brought back the ear. It's wild. And the hair goes all the way down here. And I think we're going to just work on, see, originally I thought we were going to just work on this area of the face, but I think we're going to extend it to the to this little portion of the hair. And you know, there's going to be kind of a plane subdividing the side of the facial hair here with the beard, this frontal area. So we're going to differentiate this plane right now with the oil, and knowingly we're going to leave a little bit of kind of an area here that's not as oiled out, meaning this area over here, to address later, because that will just take way too much time to address all of that today. So with the hair, I'm going to take the flesh tone, and the same flesh tone that we already mixed up, let's get a lighter shade of the flesh tone, and just start to soften that edge. And this is one of the greatest advantages to working in layers. You have quite a bit of advantage now with edge. If all of this was wet on wet, I'd be really nervous about going over information that I don't want to lose. But we're taking it pretty chill. Today is pretty chill. And you know, it's going to get even darker now, so we can start to push the effect of the form turning across the side of the forehead here. At the same time, just softening this little edge ever so slightly. And just like that, very simple. Now, let's cross-relate one area of the forehead to another. So right around here we're working on the frontal swoop of the skull. So we're going to be working on this little plane right here. This is going to be kind of a little swooping motion. And just taking from the value scale that we already mixed up, trying to keep the hue changes to a minimal. Each little section is a value change. See that? See how we're starting to develop more of the curvature of this plane. But of course we have to consider the edge quality of it too. So the edge here is going to get a little bit softer, just a little bit softer. Now I'm going to stand back, and I'm seeing that this edge now is, it needs to be pushed a little bit further away. You know, and even at this stage, I'm actually pretty far away from the painting. I'm almost at an arm's length, or exactly at an arm's length away from the painting. And let's just soften this little edge while we're at it. The edge between the forehead and the hairline is definitely one of the softest edges in the entire picture. So we'll just soften it with a little bit of a transparency. Very simple. Now I think that this color is starting to get too hot, so let's return to the palette. And when there's too much heat to a particular area of flesh tone, what color would you use to cool it down? I say sap green to the rescue. So we're going to be using a little bit of sap green into this area of the palette. You know, and to combat the greenishness of it, ivory black. Only a little bit of ivory black, just to help to neutralize these tones. Ultramarine blue. So we're really using the cool colors to really calm down the heat from those colors that we mixed up. There we go. And this is the value range, the little window of value here that we're going to be taking from. So I did say I'm not going to worry too much about the hue changes, but I think that area was just getting way too hot. A little more burnt umber, sap green, ultramarine blue. I think that should be about good. There we go. So it's not quite as hot as it once was. So you see how easy it is to just calm down the heat of those colors. So now we're going to take a look at we're going to look a little further into these form overlaps. So see how there's kind of like a little swoop? We're going to try to create that with the value transitions and the transparencies. See how we're letting certain areas be transparent? And the aim of this is really to bring it to life. Make it really look like our model is sitting there. There's this motto or figure of speech, I don't know what to call it, but there's this saying that goes around in the realist painting community. Make the thing look like the thing. Make this thing look like not that thing. Do not make this thing look like that thing. But make this thing look like the real life model. That's what we're going to try to do. And my goal here is to show you that it's fun. Like it's really a rewarding thing. It's a challenging thing, but it's really fun to analyze these forms and try to create images that are reminiscent of the beauty in nature, creating works that are just like our eyes observing. You know, we're trying to go beyond the idea of, wow, that looks just like a photograph. No, I want to make it look like, wow, that's what it really is like to observe and to see someone. And that's what I mean by bringing this to life. So we're observing these little lighter shapes here. So I put in a darker one. So this little darker shape here. And now we're going to bring back these lighter planes. Adding a little bit, I'm going to add a little bit more cadmium red medium just to bring back a little bit more of the blood flow to that area of the forehead. And we're really trying to work this transition here. It's a very delicate one. And you may say, well, okay, you're trying to make it look like the real life model and not like the photograph, so why are you working from the photograph? And like I explain in almost every video now, like I explain almost every day, it's really hard to get the model there in front of you every single day. There are model fees, the space, and all of that stuff. So here's how I'm approaching it. I'm taking all the information that I know about form, value, color, edge, anatomical structure, and I'm using the photo reference only as a guide to where these shapes might be, and that's all. And so we're going to put a little more light right here towards the frontal, I know what this is called now, don't I? Superciliary arch here. There's going to be a little bit more light here. You know, and if perhaps these colors need to be adjusted to further represent the colors from life, we're going to be able to do that. Remember, I'm going to be taking this painting to my portrait group, Tuesday morning portrait group, and working on it from life there too. And I'm starting to lean my finger on this a little bit too much, so I'm going to get my what was this called? Maul stick. And I'm going to lean on this a little bit, so I don't leave too many pinky marks on the painting. And it's going to get a little bit darker around here, the frontal region of the skull. Very, very subtle though, just a little tiny value change here, almost imperceptible. So now we're going to move on to the eye. And this one eye, and we're not going to put too much information from it. What I'm doing is I'm oiling it out again. I think I missed certain areas around here when I was oiling it out, so I'm just doing this just to double check. Alright, so I'm not going to spend too much time on one area, and I'm really going to try to optimize how much information I put in with each shape. So let's get to it. So right here, the eyelid can take a little more specificity now for that shape. So for instance, this area can taper up a little more. So it's going to go up a little more. And now we're going to take a look at the corner of this side of the eye right there. So it's a little bit softer, and we're going to be seeing a little bit of light here. So very, very gently, just whispering in there, a very quiet little light, just like that. Very simple. And we're going to put a little bit more of a specific shape here for the concavity of the eye socket, this little indent for the side of the eye socket. So it's actually going to get a little bit darker right around here. See that? We're starting to subdivide these planes into smaller planes. So a little bit darker right there, and then it starts to taper down. And see how we're letting the transparency of the paint show through. It's going to taper away over there. And you know, there might even be a little bit more light that we can describe. Little sparkles of light here and there. And a little more light right here. It's going to be a much more delicate taper of value. So I'm going to try to use my pinky actually, because it may help to reduce the bounciness of this canvas. It's a large canvas, so it's going to be bouncy if I don't try to hold it back down with my pinky. I go all the way down here, trying to observe these nuances in the planes. Again, not going to span forever on each individual spot, just trying to put in what is necessary to help the planes evolve. And again, this is a really kind of a laid back, kind of a chill day. You know, this is really one of those days you want to sit back, have a nice cup of tea, and just relax. A little darker over there. And now the next thing we're going to look at are these little form overlaps over here on the side of the eye socket. See that? 1, 2, let's put in a third one. 3. And see how fast we're kind of moving along these forms? What's helping out with the speed is having that value scale and taking it one step at a time, not worrying about the hue changes. Not worried about the hue changes. This is pretty much all the same color, just different values of it. I mean, in theory, as we change the value, we change the color, right? But as I showed you in the beginning, I really tried to keep the hue variation to a minimal. So we're going to push a little bit more light in this plane here. A little bit more here. We're going to soften this little transition. Just soften it a little bit. And perhaps there's even a little bit more of a dark shape over here. Really exploring the surface. I may be moving through this quickly, but in your own painting, you really want to take your time with each one of these shapes. And if you've never painted before, you know, take this as an opportunity to really be a part of the artist studio and to, you know, sit back and enjoy, just relax and observe the development of these things. It's a lot of fun. And if you really want to get into painting, and perhaps you have little to no experience in painting, I'm actually trying to work on, I'm working on some online teaching resources. So I really want to bring more people, and I really want to give more people access to learning. So I think that's all we're going to do for that little area of the, you know what, hold on. This plane is too flat. We want to add a little bit more of a gradation there. Let me soften that a little bit. Alright, so we're really going to want to move on now. Okay. We're going to keep the pace a little bit quick. So let's move to, how about the nose? So the nose, there's going to be a very distinct plane here that I didn't quite describe before. And so again, I'm really trying to keep the color changes very subtle. So this is, again, I'm just taking right from my palette. So there's a plane here that I didn't quite see before. It's a little pocket of value there. And then the edge is going to get much, much lighter, or softer, sorry, as we roll across towards that lighter region. See that? See how we're building like this very specific shape? Almost looks like a little, I don't know, like a little mountain right here. Little peaks and ridges of the mountain. And of course, we're going to have to connect the forms to one another. So to establish the connectivity of this form to this form, there's going to be a little bit of a pathway in between them. You know, and that value might be a little too dark. So again, just taking from the palette. There we go. Very simple. Simple little gradation of form. I want to push this light a little bit more. See how we're kind of relating all of these areas to one another? This is really how we're going to bring these shapes to life. A little bit more of a light plane here. And now this edge is going to be even sharper. Trying to push that edge and keep this area softer. And I think there's going to be a little bit more depth to the bottom of the wing of the nose. So we're going to push that value a little bit darker than we had initially described it. And just like that, just observing the most emphatic plane changes. Trying to keep this canvas from bouncing. And just like that, we're starting to get the curvature of the bulb of the nose, or at least starting to describe it with a little more depth now. And we'll just reinsert the highlight there just for good measure. There. So now the next little area to look at that's going to need a little more delineation is right here. So again, we're pushing the plane a little bit darker just to kind of further enhance the illusion of the form. Then we're going to work on this area. So pushing it a little bit darker just to kind of enhance the illusion of the form. A little bit of a softer edge there. Alright, so now let's take a look at the side plane of the face. So right over there, it's going to get a little bit darker. So the plane is getting a little bit darker. Right over here. As this area, again, as you know, turning away from the light. And then, of course, the same form overlap we were talking about before, we're just hitting these planes with a little bit more specificity. And we're letting the brush wiggle around and leave certain patches, just to leave some kind of texture. And so even, so say that, I think over here, it's going to be a little more of a light plane. And a darker plane right next to it over here. Let's go ahead and push this little pocket of value a little brighter. And this little area can get a little softer. And I think there's going to be a little more that we can describe for the nose. So this was kind of jumping out to me a little bit. So I'm going to get a little bit of a darker value there and extend it up to here, as this area here is turning away from the light quite a bit. So right over there, it's going to be getting a little bit darker. It's going to be almost a little accent right here. And in fact, I think it is an accent. So this form is turning, and reaches a boundary here, and then starts to go over again. Imagine you're an ant running across the surface like a little roller coaster, going down here, going back up here. This area here, this dark value right here is going to describe the little pocket between these two shapes. And yes, this stuff does take a little bit of patience. But, you know, the patience that you need to do things like this can really be learned. Can really improve on your overall patience with painting. So a little bit more of a soft edge here. We're going to describe this shape, the dark shape underneath here, with a little bit more clarity. So that's going to go down. It's going to get a little bit darker down here. Just taking from the flesh tones. Probably should have a gray value scale on the palette. There we go. Now we're getting more specificity. You know what? Let's mix up a value scale on the palette for the beard. So let's start off with burnt umber, ultramarine blue. This is why it's nice to have a large palette for this kind of stuff. So I have so much room to mix. Ivory black. So this is going to be kind of the darker region of the beard. And then we'll use flake white, a little more medium. So we'll use the flake white to bring out some more light. And I'm using it just because it doesn't raise the value too much. Now watch what happens with the titanium white with the same amount. Yep. Really bright. A little more burnt umber. And I think this is a good little color value range for the beard. But one thing I'm going to want is another little value scale for the flesh tones surrounding the beard. So this is another brush. I haven't really been cleaning them just because I kind of have a, I don't know, I have a warm flesh tone brush, a cool flesh tone brush, and I'm not really changing the hue too much. Now if I were to clean a brush, I would have, if I were using the same brush between these two shapes right here, I would definitely clean off the brush, but see how I have two. So anyway, so these are going to be the flesh tones kind of surrounding the beard, and I'm going to let them kind of touch on the palette just to have a kind of a, I don't know, a kind of a relationship between those shapes of value on the palette before putting them onto the painting. Gotta be careful not to get the paint on myself. Alizarin permanent. I don't know, a little bit more yellow ochre. Cadmium red medium. Probably a little too much for that, so titanium white. And something about that ought to do it, just so I can have a balance, kind of a boundary between the beard colors and the flesh tone colors. So let's switch back to the brush with the color for the beard. And I think I'm going to start off with probably somewhere in the mid-tone range, so somewhere around here. Alright, so I'm going to stick to perhaps this little area of the hair. So again, just putting in a few little half tones there. Not really going to be doing much, but this is the area that I want to work on the most right now. And don't worry, we're almost done. I think for tomorrow, I'll probably spend some time bringing that ear to life. Either that or move on to the hand, I don't know. But again, we're taking it one step at a time, and I'm really trying to bring the experience of being here in the studio, creating these paintings every single day. It brings me much joy in life to be able to create these paintings. Hopefully, it does the same for you when you paint. So using the layer underneath, this is still, I think, pretty much the layer for the underpainting. I'm going to let some of those values show, and I'm actually going to get a little bit of sap green and ultramarine blue. I just want a kind of dark, not too hot, but kind of dark warmish tone for back here, because some of the back of his neck is showing through, but see, that's way too much heat. So we're going to put in a little bit more of the ivory black and try to neutralize that shape. So hopefully that does the trick. And it does, kind of. So here's another nice thing about having a dry layer of paint underneath. Yep, you can subtract. So I just subtracted a little bit, and I'm going to go back and forth between the colors for the beard and the flesh tone. So again, let's go ahead and put that darker flesh tone back in. Hopefully, there we go. See, it's warm, but it's not that warm. A little bit of a balance. And don't worry, almost done. These are the last few brush strokes, or I guess last region of the painting that I'll work on for today. Let's see, a little bit of a darker shape underneath of the beard right here. A little darker there. Just to try to get a plain change for the beard. Right over here. A little bit more of the hair. But I think we're going to render out or develop the ear with a little bit more clarity later. And then once that layer dries, then we'll go back into the hair and make it really look like the hair is overlapping the ear, making it very volumetric. Just subdividing these shapes. Let's push it even darker back here. So a little bit more ivory black. Think of ivory black as kind of like a neutral blue. It's a dark neutral blue. So now that I've been using the Liquid Original for a little while, I can kind of compare it now to the Neo McGilp medium that I was using. And I'm noticing that the Liquid Original is actually a faster dryer even than the Neo McGilp that I was using. And originally I said I didn't really like the smell of Liquid, but after a while you kind of get used to it. Guess it's the same with everything, huh? So just a few little adjustments to these edges and I think we'll call it a day. come back tomorrow with a fresh eye and continue to develop, continue to bring these shapes to life. Gotta make this edge very, very soft. A little bit more titanium white. A little bit more of a shape here. And let's just push this area a little bit warmer, just so it looks like the flesh tone is underneath. I know that's drastic, but the layer underneath is dry. So what I'm going to do is subtract a little bit of this. See that? And I don't know, by subtracting that, we're going to see kind of the influence of the flesh tones underneath of the beard. So just bouncing back and forth between the brushes. I want it to appear like the beard is resting over top of some of the some little areas of flesh tone. And this is how we're really going to get the texture of the beard. Now it's really going to start to come to life. Just letting some of the brush strokes do some of the work there. Going back and forth between these two brushes now. And it's going to get even darker down here. I take some of the darker region of the color for the beard. Now it's really going to start to look like the beard is resting on the flesh tone. Whoops, did I just mix the brush? Oops. See, this is what happens sometimes. You mix the brushes that you didn't want to mix. But it's okay. Alright, so we're back now with the brush for the beard. It's alright, mistakes happen. Let it happen. A little bit more light. I'm going to be pushing this plane here forward a little bit. A little bit of a darker plane down here. Just kind of softening these edges now. Very, very soft. A little more of a darker shape here. And I think that'll be about it for today. So that being said, it is my hope, dream, and ambition to bring the experience of being here in the studio creating these paintings to you every single day. I wish you the best in all of your artwork, and I'll be back again in another 24 hours. And as always, here is what the painting looks like with the camera as close to front and center as I can possibly get it. And yep, the glare keeps growing, so that's why another reason I have the camera on the side as I'm filming, just to try to minimize all of that glare. That being said, I really hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll be back again tomorrow.